Yes, we are. Welcome, everybody.
Wonderful. So welcome everyone back to Wellness Wednesday. And today we are looking at allies or all lies. But what we really want to talk about is what is a real ally? What does that look like? And just to kind of, first of all, I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves, and then Bahia and I have a couple of questions. I know with all these folks, we aren't going to be able to cover it. But I just remember being in environments, and there was always an issue with the women's movement and this whole idea of, being an ally, and people, white women were supposed to be my allies. And then I, kind of discovered that when they got whatever position they were in, they didn't remember me, right? So there was no real ally there. And on another level, I had folks that would just show up for me that were always there that kind of got it. I didn't have to explain anything to them. And I just wanted so that when we move forward, we're clear when we're looking at Kathleen and Saida, who are both people of color, and their experience in their skin and how they've engaged with that is a little different. So I don't actually consider Saida and Kathleen allies. I know that sounds weird, but they're like family, one. The other is that their experiences as being people of color, even with white or light skin privilege. Does that make sense? So I just want to be very, very clear about that, as we start. So Bahia, do you have a question?
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to say,
we have to have everybody introduce themselves and then answer the question. So.
Right. So why don't we just call people out, because, we get the weird Dora blinks when we ask people to just jump in. So I'm going to just pick people. So first we will say, how about Saida?
Saida, that's me. So my name is Saida Segovia Taylor. I'm in Chicago. Executive Director of Organic Oneness that promotes the interconnectedness of all people on the earth. Born and raised here. My mother's from Colombia. My father's from Honduras. What more do you want to know?
No, that's it.
Okay, that's cool. Great. There we go.
Okay, Mom, you pick. Who's next?
Andrea.
Hey, my name is Andrea Swanson. I live in Sacramento, California. I was born and raised in Washington State. I work in the green technology industry with renewable energy, and have been interested and active in issues around racial justice since I was probably in my early 20s, when I first met Joy's brother, Oscar, actually, when I was 19.
All right. Thank you. Faith?
Hello, my name is Faith Holmes. I have been in race relations and social justice work for the greater part of my life. My mother took me to a Black church when I was 7 years old, and that really changed the trajectory of all of my work. So I've really been in this work heavy duty since childhood, really. I went to school for African American Studies and Psychology because I really believe that you cannot heal racism in America without understanding our true history and the psychological impact it's had on us all.
Thank you. Kathleen?
Hey, I'm Kathleen. Kathleen Cross. I am the daughter of a Black African-American father and a white mother, and raised in the Bahia community, raised with the idea that, we are all one creation, and have really had to explore from very young childhood what identity is and how race and ethnicity impact identity and how we interact with each other, and specifically melanin and the abundance of melanin and the absence of melanin, and how that impacts the way that people interact with you and the way that people interact with one another, especially around race. Published novels. One of my novels is called Skin.
You're glitching, Kathleen.
Wait, you're glitching a little bit.
Oh no.
Okay, wait.
Yeah, I thought that we might.
Oh.
I thought that we might, because I'm so sorry. I apologize that I'm traveling, but on my way to the hospital, and the middle of a family emergency. So I'm trying to go ahead and participate. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you
Okay.
now.
We can hear you.
Okay. So I was just saying that as a writer and as an author, I've really explored kind of the idea of melanin and the abundance of melanin, the absence of melanin, and how that impacts the way that we interact with one another as human beings. And I've really become very interested in the idea of white people needing heroes, needing examples of what it looks like to be an ally, and people who have really sacrificed their lives and sacrificed their positions and really been in the forefront. And all the way back to the beginning of this country, there have been those people. And I'll talk about it maybe a little bit more later. I know this was just an introduction, but I have a lot of interest right now in that, because I do think that white people need examples to look to for what that looks like.
All right. Thank you, Kathleen. And Alec, hey, you're the only male. It just occurred to me. All right.
That's good.
Uh-oh.
We only need one white guy. We only need one white guy.
Two in the middle. We only need one white man. One white man.
More than
Do
enough.
you even need that?
Right. We're happy to have you, though. Yes, we do need one.
Thank
white
you.
guy.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I'm Alec Swanson. I have been interested in doing a lot of stuff around issues of race for a very long time. It's in a variety of things, both doing work, to try and overcome issues, but also studying it deeply to understand, like, where does this stuff come from? Why is it the way it is? So that we can kind of get our heads around how to do something. If you don't understand it, you can't really change it, right? And I have some history with my parents, so doing certain things in the 60s that gave me kind of a leg up in some ways. And being raised with some of those ideas and stories, and just, investing deeply. I have a bachelor's degree in international political economy, and that was kind of my interest in understanding how the world works. And I've taken a lot of that nowadays and trying to apply that understanding to more domestic issues. You go into a degree like that and people are like, oh, I'm going to go help fix the poor people in the world. And I'm like, that's not really helpful. Right now, there's a lot of issues of race and colonialism goes into those ideas, but also nobody wants to do it at home. Nobody wants to come back to the US and go, well, this country operates off colonial mindset. So how do we use those tools to overcome what's happening here? So I try to do a lot of stuff to understand around those issues.
All right. Thank you. So, Bahia, now you can ask your question.
Oh, yeah, I'm good. Okay, great. So, well, first it actually ties in with the question that we got from our viewers. I don't know how to say her name. It looks like Nanaba or Nanaba, I'm not sure. She said, what's the difference between allies and advocates? So there's a lot of people in the white community who have put that onto the Native community in this particular person's case. But what I would think of is, when you think about a term like ally, and what it has come to mean, one, it's been very loaded. People who will call themselves allies who just don't want to see people brutalized is not the same thing as someone who's willing to sacrifice more than just their comfort, right? Someone who's really willing to, like, I had a woman at my job who used to say, I hope I'm the last director who's white. Well, why don't you leave the job? if you were hoping that you're the last one, why don't you just vacate it for somebody, if that's where you really think that as someone of color would be beneficial, then the sacrifice you'd be willing to make is to say, I need to get myself out of this position. But who wants to do that? So, when you start thinking about what my aunt Kathleen was saying had to do with what kind of sacrifices are you willing to make for the betterment of other people? Otherwise, you are an advocate, maybe, but when you come talking about a real ally, I'd love to hear everyone to tell me maybe two things that are critical components of allyship that if they are not there, they're not, that you can't qualify yourself as that. If that's okay.
You got to pick them. They're just
oh
not.
my gosh. Okay.
Something on that.
Again.
So
Wait,
yeah, so we,
Kathy, go.
okay, go.
I just wanted to say that, people will advocate for a whale or a puppy. right? So the heartfelt compassion that one has for a living thing is awesome, but it's not the same thing as allyship in equity, an investment in the human family. It's a different, to me, I feel like it's a different jumping off point in the first place. Why you would even get involved, or why you would even be concerned, or why you even think it's your fight has to do with how you position yourself in the family of man.
Exactly.
Because people will advocate for a whale, it doesn't mean that you see Black people as your equal, or that you see us all as one human family because you are willing to put a lawn sign in front of your house.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Love that.
Yeah.
Well
So,
Well said. Well,
hey.
very good.
Yeah. So for me, the word ally, it's not enough. Like I just feel like it's not enough. Friend, you know, I want people to be my friends, you know, and so if I'm in the category of ally, I'm not doing my job as a human being. You know, people are my friends, and if I don't know the name of your child, if we haven't gone to dinner together, if we don't have sporadic just phone calls, how are things going? You know, if we don't know the inner workings of our life on a daily basis, then there's a lot of work to do. And I think when we get to that level of understanding each other as friends and family, if we see ourselves as one human family, then we don't want people to hurt. We don't want bad things to happen to them. So when people start expressing, oh, I'm uncomfortable, oh, I don't have enough, I need this, that needs to change, and this is how it's impacting me, then your heart is motivated to move and do something so your friend or your family member is not hurting. So for me, ally is like in the middle of where we should be, because that, sure, yeah, I'll stand for you, but I'm not going to sacrifice, I'm not going to, you know, so you need a lot of courage, first of all, you know, to stand up in those times of, okay, I'm going to let go of my job and give it to someone else because I love them and they need it more than, and I can evaluate our situations. So I don't even think I answered your question, but
But it's good. I mean, I think it's good because I think that sometimes it is not, that's when you start going, that she's more on the all lives of the allies side of it. Is that if you're an ally, just based on what people generally think, it's all lies. That's not, you're not willing to make those kind of sacrifices. So,
right.
but I do like that. But I mean,
I wanted to say something too that, you know, it's really interesting because Kathleen, for those who are watching, is the person that I'm talking about in the story of the trip to the grocery store. And the issue was so interesting is Kathleen wasn't being an ally, although a lot of white people probably thought that. She was being Kathleen. She was being auntie, right? So it wasn't what we were actually all very surprised, because that wasn't like a thing. She was being Kathleen, you know. And at the same time, I'm not saying she was unaware of her privilege. I'm not saying that, but in terms of engaging me, she wasn't my ally. No. She's my sister. You know what I mean? So it wasn't that kind of a thing. But again, it did open it up. Millions of people saw that, and a lot of white people felt like, I can do that, and that's true. But I don't think they understood what was motivating Kathleen, right?
But that's what she was talking about when people need a hero too, is that when people see someone do something that they feel like it would take a lot of courage for them to do, and they see that somebody just did it because it was the right thing to do, without being like, what's going to be the consequences of me doing this? You know, she just moved into who she was. People need to see examples of that. I think that's why that thing went viral, because people were like, wait a minute, this was a woman who didn't have to do any of that, but chose to do it in that moment. And what did she really lose? What did it cost her to do that and to interrupt that situation? And I think that's part of the hero part, right? If we know the people who we can look to say, I want to be like that person, then you start to feel like you can potentially do something. I think, you know, so long as people feel like it's just so, wow, you're just taking such a huge risk, then they're not going to do anything, you know?
Right. Yeah. And it's the motivation, right? Like if people are doing it to self-grandize or like, put them up on a pedestal. Like that's the wrong motivation.
Like the woman who jumped out and had a picture taken of her helping somebody during Black Lives Matter. That woman jumped out and so had somebody could take a picture. Yeah, not that kind. That doesn't count.
Yeah, and I think the thing with allyship is you have to be willing to step up, step in, have the back of, to educate people. Like those are all key issues. But again, if ally for me is a hard word in that we are one human family and we have a problem in our family, in our house with racism. And as long as I see you as separate, then allyship is hard because you don't sacrifice for people that you see as different from you. Whereas when you see people as members of your own human family, you're going to show up in all kinds of ways and make sacrifices. So I think for me, the term allyship is hard, or ally is hard, because this is my family. This is not something that I'm just going to stand on the side of every once in a while. But I do think that most white people have challenges with knowing how to show up. Because as Kathleen mentioned, we don't have, and they're there, but we don't know the stories of the abolitionists. We don't know the stories of the people who have sacrificed and have shown up and have paved the way for the world that we live in today. So that's a really important thing that, we have to reach out to people. And, allyship is kind of, I think, like 101, 200 level course, whereas when you get really closer and above and understanding the true history of the nation that we come from and the historical perspective of how we're needing to show up today, then that's a different conversation. But I think ally is kind of empty.
But I think part of what you're saying is when you need to help people understand those things, you need to help those people understand those things. Not me. I don't have time for that.
Right.
So part of it is like, I'm not going to, part of that for me is the people who want to be allies, the people who are in our family. It's just like, do you ever see the Solange video where she's in the elevator with Jay-Z and Beyonce and she's coming after Jay-Z and people are like, okay, that's when you've done somebody's family member wrong. They're throwing their shoe at you. Like that's how much they're going to stop you. And you've seen that with some of these folks who interrupt the Karens and the Kevins of the world. Because they're like, no, you will not, And if there's something that comes out of you when you are like, I am taking you down, that's my sister, like you're not about to do that to me.
That's my job. Yeah.
And that's the thing is I'm saying when you're like, people need those examples, people need to be moved to that place. Yes, you need to be the person to take that person to that place because I'm not going to do that. And I think that you're right. When somebody is my friend or my family member, and if you were even trying to be an ally or whatever else, when you have that opportunity and you don't do it, like there's no waking your way back. Because now I know when it comes down to it, you're not what you said you were. And there's really little chance you're ever going to get that opportunity back with me.
Exactly.
I just wanted to say one quick thing, and I know, this was going to happen, but I was going to also say that one of the things that happened, I was listening to NPR, and these were folks whose families had sacrificed their lives during slavery, white people who had been killed or murdered, and they said their names, are nowhere. Nobody knows about them, and part of these folks their concern was, they said, we don't want this history erased. We want people to know what our family sacrificed. But you see, under the Confederacy and all, they said no one's gonna really hold high those folks that went against them. So they tried very desperately, to basically erase these folks. And they were talking about that and how there was a book coming out that was going to be speaking to these folks who had done that incredible work, and again, if you don't do it, a lot of times we see things missing. It's just not going to be there unless we say it and we write about it. And so I appreciate those folks that are doing that work.
Okay, Andrea.
Alec, you're always going to be last.
Sorry.
The things that Saida said about being motivated out of love, I think I hear a lot of people talk about feeling guilty, feeling bad. that isn't a motivational place to come from. If you're coming from a place of love, of looking at each other as family, that's an easy place to act from. It's an easy place to move from. And I think that allyship, some of the conversations I've been involved in is allyship really enough? How about accomplice instead? Because that's moving into a place of action rather than passively agreeing, but not acting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that. Especially when you're trying to break down systems and
yes.
somebody who's in the plan with you.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not in it willing to make the same sacrifices of the other people who are on the front lines that don't have a choice about whether they're on the front line or not, you're not really in the same boat yet. If you're not also willing to, make some sacrifices of your own, if, you're out on the line, and are you willing to get arrested for that protest? Are you willing to be the one who's hit with pepper spray instead of person standing next to you? Or are you willing to, like you said, give up that job and allow another person to come into that position? Those are things that to think about. And it's a lot easier to make those choices when we're thinking about a place of, that's my brother, that's my sister, that's my family, and not a place of, oh, I feel really bad about inequality and racism, but I don't know what to do,
Well, and also in the Baha'i writings, it says a tremendous effort is needed. And I think that is talking to us white folks. I don't think that's talking to our African-American brothers and sisters. A tremendous effort is needed.
Alex?
I think one of the most difficult things about this issue is that in order to really highlight what this work looks like, it looks like, or it appears for a moment, that white people are being centered in the conversation. You know what I'm saying? So if we want to talk about wokeness or white allyship, it's very difficult to have this conversation and still keep the focus and the center on Black people and on what's happening with Black people and what needs to change in our society. And I think for people who want to be allies, or Andrea, what did you call it? Accomplices. I love that. Is really practicing what it looks like to take yourself out of the center and place Black people there. And you can see even something as benign, really, in a way, as Black Lives Matter. It's not saying Black power by all means necessary. Black Lives Matter has people loading their rifles. It's like when we really think about what's going on in this country, in order for you to be a part of this fight, you have to be willing at every turn to take yourself out of the center and place the real issues there. Because if you don't, then you're gonna get your feelings hurt. Let me put it that way. You're gonna get your feelings hurt because it's gonna look like it's self-aggrandizement. It's gonna look like self-serving. It's gonna look like you're trying to be a hero instead of trying to be an advocate or an ally or a tell me the word again.
Accomplice.
Accomplice.
Gosh, I need a t-shirt. Accomplice. I love that word because it's so action. There's so much action in it.
Yeah, you both get arrested when you are in the car with someone and they shoot up the gas station. It doesn't matter. You're there. You're there at the spot.
That's what the word means.
Too. Right? So I need you to be in the car during the robbery with me. And we're basically looting for justice. That's what we're
tell me you're not looting, right?
Right? We're justice looters, right? Marauding for justice. Okay.
Justice.
So we gotta go to Alex, and then we have questions. Okay, go ahead.
So I don't care about a label. Call me whatever you want, right? I mean, that's not even my place. I feel like people are looking for badges and people are looking for checklists. Oh, I did it now. And, I cringe when I see somebody call themselves an ally or something like it. I'm like, if you're doing the work, you don't need to claim a title for yourself. Everybody who cares and matters knows you're either doing it or you're not. You're going to show up or you're not. It's like Bahia said, if you call yourself an ally, and then the situation happens and you're not there and you don't, take any fire. Okay, nice label, it doesn't really mean anything. So whether you call it, whether it's an ally or an accomplice or whatever, y'all call me what you want. I'm just gonna keep doing what I do, and so when it comes to that part of it, but also I think what everybody's talking about is to some degree there's a need for accepting there's going to be sacrifice. And it's funny because a lot of this conversation does what a lot of conversation does, is tries to ameliorate people's fears of how much they're going to have to sacrifice, but the reality is that we live under a system that's toxic, that's sick, and that is designed to target and traumatize particular groups of people over others. Why do I not want to sacrifice that system? It's gross. If you recognize it for what it is, if you're willing to recognize it for what it is, what's the sacrifice? If your value system says that's not okay, the story with Kathleen, she said she didn't think about giving anything up or what should I don't believe that for a second. I think Kathleen knew exactly what the possible consequences were and had no fear of it, because her values said the sacrifices, the consequences are not as valuable as my relationship, my love, my sense of justice for my sister.
I don't think so. 2 seconds.
Interesting point, Alex. That's an interesting point, because when you think about it, part of it has to do with the way you move in the world, period. And whether or not you believe in certain kind of spiritual truths or spiritual laws. And if you have a grounding you have a faith that the universe works a certain way, then you are going to come out on the side of justice and know that you're on the right side, and there's a certain protection that comes with being on the right side. I'm thinking about this family, and I have a lot of heroes. I have a lot of white anti-racist heroes. And that's because I've gone out and looked for, where are these people? How come I didn't learn about it in school? And there's this family called the Rankins from Ohio. And this was back in the 1860s, before slavery was abolished. This man, he was a gangster in the same way to me as John Brown was a gangster for justice. This man found a plot of land, built a house that was 1,200 square feet, put a basement in the house where he knew what he was going to do with that basement was to provide safety for people who were escaping slavery. He and his wife fed, clothed, and transported escaping Africans who had been enslaved in Kentucky and made it across the river to their home. They built this home on the top of a hill and put a lantern in the window every night. Now, they had neighbors. And the neighbors didn't like it. And the neighbors would firebomb the house. The man was always having to go out with his rifle out in his yard to protect his house because they weren't messing around. I didn't mention the fact that they had 13 children.
Whoa.
They had 13 white kids who lived in the house, who had to go to school in the community, who were bullied, whose lives were threatened. They were not messing around. To me, honestly, my voice gets shaky when I think about my cowardice compared to their I don't even want to call it heroism. It was just they chose to live a life of service. And I know we don't really like that word service because maybe the word service doesn't feel right to some people, but that is exactly what it is. That the kind of sacrifice that's required for you to say, and I'm not talking about people putting an S, like you said, Alec, putting an S on their chest and, being known for or whatever. But just knowing that there's certain universal laws and you want to be on the right side of those laws.
Wow. Can't hear you, but
yeah, you're muted.
I don't have 13 kids, but I would not want to be having them in jeopardy. But when
right.
you make a decision that you're going to do the right thing, you're willing to sacrifice everything.
I got
to go to these questions though, real quick. Do you want to say something?
I want to say one thing before you go there, and that it speaks to what both Alec and Kathleen were saying. Bahia met a woman in, I think it was a dollar store, that had adopted a young girl from where was it, B?
The
the
Congo.
Congo, was she from the Congo? And she was little girl, like 2 years old or something like that. And, Bahia, realized that she needed some help managing the little girl's hair. The woman was really gracious and, exposes the little girl to a Congolese community where she lives. She was serious, all in. Well, a family member came over to the house. And the girls were playing. She has two white girls. She's white. And
4 white girls. And
4
this
white
was the last one, yeah.
And then this one last child, and they were all playing nearby, and her sister, the woman's sister, had come by for dinner. And they were having a conversation, and the kids were right there playing. And she said something like, was it, why did you choose one of those?
So what happened was, there's 2 things. What she told me was, she noticed that not her sister, but a friend of hers, when they came over, they've been friends with them for like 30 years. Okay. When they came over and played with their daughters when they were little, they get on the floor with the daughters, they play with the daughters, and they didn't do that for their daughter. And so she said, our values, and I just stopped being friends with them. And so our daughters thought that was really, extreme. I think the oldest daughter was maybe like 9 years old. And then they were at a swimming meet.
Okay.
And there was another little girl at the swimming meet who walked over to her other daughter and said, why would you want to adopt a kid from Africa? So she looked at her daughter to say, like, well, what are you going to say? Now you've seen my sacrifice. I got rid of friends forever. What are you going to do? As a 7-year-old, the expectation is so that you're going to do something. And the little girl she was shocked, but she said, why wouldn't we? Look how beautiful she is. And she said she felt like it was appropriate for the age group for her beginning, that this is your sister and your responsibility. It doesn't matter if somebody says something about people from Africa and it's not her, you can't be friends with them. That level of, it has to start really early.
Demonstrated it by breaking off a lifelong friendship. Mm-hmm. And their daughters cried because they were going to miss her. They said, well, go on and grieve because she's out. She's gone. And again, that is something that I'm not saying that lightly because, I told you a woman said to me in another meeting, she said her father said something to her as a result of all the protests and where she stood with it as a white woman that hurt her so tremendously. She said, he said something to me. She never said what it was, but that was so hurtful that I knew I couldn't have him in my life anymore. Her father, right? So that, again, and we weren't talking about anything that had to do with allies or anything. She just brought that up, my father, and she was teary-eyed. But she realized that toxicity she couldn't have in her life anymore. And she apparently didn't realize it was that deep. So again, this is whenever all of us are talking about sacrifices, that's just real stuff. Real stuff.
Okay.
Can I jump in a little point on that too? Is that I get into a lot of conversations about this kind of stuff, right? And there's so much to change, to make change happen. And I, for one, very much believe that if you have the opportunity to discuss with someone, to change their mind, to give them something new to think about and transform the way they perceive the world, you have an obligation to do so. But also, speaking to what the stories that you guys were just telling, we can't just be looking for those magical situations and magical words that will just transform whoever exists in the world. If we just do it just right, we also have to be willing to hold standards that are transformative to the world. And when people transgress those things, you address it and talk to them and see if there's an opportunity. And if there's not an opportunity, you have to say, okay, this far and no further. There's a line. It's not acceptable that you cross this line because there's harm, there's trauma, there's pain, there's, lifelong damage that you can cause by this. And in my presence, that's not going to happen.
Yes. All righty. Thank you. Moving to the questions. So we have a couple questions. So one person asks, should white people be calling themselves ally at all, or allow a person of color to make that judgment? And that's what Alex was speaking to, is you start to use the badge and to say, well, as an ally, I'm an ally, right? So that's one thing. Another question said, this is from our dear friend Liz. Love Liz. What do you say to white people who may mean well and think they're helping out, but they're actually doing harm through their allyship? That is a good one, around being harmful. And how do you keep the focus on Black people when sometimes white people think that you're being disunifying, right? That has to do with, like, race wasn't an issue till you brought it in the room, right? That kind of a thing, disunity. So let's speak to those ones first, and then we'll go to some of the other questions. Who wants to jump on that?
Well, I think that, the problem is that people always want to say, oh, this is causing disunity so that we won't talk about the real stuff. But as most of us, I believe, are Baha'is, in the Baha'i writings, it's very clear that the purpose of justice is the appearance of unity. There is no way to have unity in our society without first having justice. So we have to always make sure that the focus is on justice and showing up for people who have for so long received such grievous and slow healing wounds. So we have to show up to say, this far and no further. We will be fighters of social, will not rest until social justice has been achieved.
But those people think that they are doing that. This is the thing, is that you have a lot of folks who are very well-intentioned, who don't want to see anyone harmed, but who still are not aware that they have been racialized and socialized in certain spaces where I have had people very legitimately want to see equity happen at the finish line, don't want to run the race. Okay, they want to high five at the finish line because they believe in it. I think they're sincere. They're not lying. They want to see justice. But on a day-to-day, you're doing some white shit to me every day that is oppressing me. I called him Black at least twice. I called him, I said, listen, the whiteness is causing me to have anxiety and some pressure in my chest not coming in. Now, my folks that I work with, because they're trying to be allies, are like, they don't realize that simply their way of being, the way that they've associated their whiteness with what is right and professional, even though they still think at the end of the finish line, they want to be there to high five me because they want to see equity too. What's the problem is, that's what I think that Liz is getting to, is the fact that there are people who are like, I am a champion for equity, but you're treating the people of color in your office like, you're disrespecting them in so many ways because you're centering your whiteness as the right way to do things, the right way to think about things, the right way to consult, the right way to engage. So long as you're doing that, it doesn't matter what you want the finish line to be. You're thwarting the finish line all the way through because you're not self-reflecting at all on how your whiteness is so centered. So how do we, go ahead.
Reminds me of the whole conversation about white people saying, "Oh, I don't see color. All people. I just want one human race, and I don't focus on that. I don't see that." And I have some family members on my mom's side of my family who, it is a struggle. It is a struggle because you can't be where you're not, right? You can't be where you're not. And the only way for you to get where you're not is to admit that maybe you don't know everything. So I think the well-meaning people are kind of in two categories for me. There are people who are really just in denial. They're scared of Black people. They think white people are more beautiful. They think white people are more trustworthy, and they know that's wrong. They know there's something wrong with feeling that way. And so on this issue, they just go, "Oh, I don't see anything. I don't see," and it's a hit dog or holler almost kind of thing. And then there's people who, they know it's not okay. It's not okay. The society is structured wrong. There's no justice. The land was stolen from people who were obliterated. They know, but they still don't want to let go of the power structure. That's like kind of two different kinds of camps almost that people are working from. And so those two groups of people calling themselves allies is a non-starter. If you're still there, then you have some self-education. And it's not even about, sidling up to somebody Black and saying, "Help me with this." This is about, we got Google now, people. Come on.
Right.
You want to know who John and Jean Rankin are? Go look them up and see what they lived and died for. You want to know, look up John Brown. You need some examples of the way white people have transformed their lives and become anti-racist. And not just not racist. They became anti-racist, where their entire lives reflected the way what they know about the way the universe is supposed to work, what they know about spiritual laws. And if you're not ready for that, then just say, you know what, I'm just not really ready. I'm not really ready to sacrifice. I'll put a lawn sign up. I can do that. And just admit that you're not there. But for somebody to not admit that there's work to be done, or that there's some education that they don't have, good luck watching TV to get it. You're not going to get it there.
So my nephew's
Right.
Ivy League friends, they say, wow, it's terrible. I'm in agreement. But I like my stuff though. Okay, let's don't get it twisted. I'm not giving up my privilege. I get what you're saying. I understand it. I appreciate it. I realize it. But yeah, I'm not giving up my white privilege. And they were straight up about that. They were straight up. They said, I'm not giving. That's where I draw the line. I'm not giving up this. I know I'm on the benefiting side of this, and hey, it sucks, but it's the way it is. And I have no intention of giving that up to do all the things that you're talking about. These folks, Quakers, a variety of people that kind of stood up. I'm not going that route. This is, American capitalism, and do the best you can. So some folks are just that honest about it, and I appreciate that, because I know where you stand with me. Where I have the biggest difficulty is when I'm dealing with folks that are promoting themselves, and again, once they're centering their whiteness around their goodness, right? I did this for you people, kind of thing. And I struggle with folks that are in that space, and when you're in that,
people are people of color. First of all, we have to say this. I will say this is what I'm saying, but I still think it's true. Although everything I say, I think is true. But let's just go with this. Here's this. I think that if that you get it right with Black people, everybody's going to benefit. So for me, I'm always going to start with the blackity black. How do you do with blackity black people? And then from there, if your aim, I talk to teachers about this all the time, is to effectively educate, encourage, and affirm Black children, you will effectively educate and affirm all children. If that's who you start with, everybody's going to benefit from the care and the intention and the thoughtfulness and the self-reflection that you do for that child. Everybody's going to benefit from. So I'm always going to be talking about Black people first, because again, part of what allyship also has to do with, I've gone to work with people who are not Black, who have a very different experience with the white staff that I have. Again, they have their own ability to be disparaged and to be mistreated, but the visceral response to how they deal with me is very different. And how are you aligned with me? We're both people of color now, right? And I always say, like, I had one friend of mine, she's Latinx, and we had this conversation about the fact that, yeah, you might be diminished in some ways, you might be disregarded in some ways, but you don't engender this "how dare you" feeling that comes out of them when I'm addressing something. That is history. That is epigenetic. That is a different level of, you are the dream of the exoticized white woman for them. I'm the dream of the sidekick. They want me to be their Black sidekick so bad. When that dream dies, the level of "how dare you, me so high and you so low" that I experience in a regular interaction, you don't experience. How are you now aligned with me? How are you being my ally in that moment? That's a whole nother discussion around lateral oppression and those types of things. So anyway, so we're talking about Black people first. That's my feeling. We're talking about Black people. But I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on that.
I would say that, my experience now with people of color has been, I've had, because I'm always working with folks in the field that are in their lane, and I've had an incredibly positive experience. Now I've also been in a situation where I had a full scholarship, $57,000 to go to school. And there were 2 scholarships because they were created for people of color, because they didn't have any people of color graduating, right, with PhDs in particular. And when they, I ended up getting a master's and not a PhD. But anyway, in this particular program, there were 2 scholarships. And the reason they had the scholarship is because the accreditation board said, we're not going to accredit your program unless you have some people of color. So they created these 2 scholarships, and the moment they got accreditation, they disbanded them. They, it basically disbanded the scholarships. Well, the other person, Richard, Latinx. Matter of fact, I used to drop him off. We used to ride together. We would go, he lived in a migrant community. And I said, well, like Richard, right? And I mentioned Richard was Mexican, and I realized I outed him. He hadn't told anybody he was Latinx, right? It was like, oh my God, I've lost my, my place. It freaked him out. And I looked at him, I went, well, I didn't know you was hiding, you know what I mean? So I've had that experience too, where you have, again, it has to do with the same kind of stuff, the kind of harm and feeling like I need to be as white as I can to make it, to pass. I get all that. I just didn't know. He should have told me in the car on the way home, hey, don't out me. But again, at that point, I'm realizing, oh, you was never with me outside the car. Outside the car, you were somewhere else, and you didn't want to be aligned with me. And that was a surprise to me because I didn't know. He spoke Spanish in the car. It was interesting because, we all would be together, but not when we got to school. And at that point, he was Ricardo, he was Richard, and so there was, a very, very different feeling.
Okay, really quick. We are glitching for some reason. People are giving me some feedback that our stuff is glitching. So I don't know if Alex, our tech guy, do we know why we're glitching? It says people are getting, let's see, messages. I'm just trying to see. It says that it was, but it's smooth now. Okay, so right now I guess it's cool. Okay. So hopefully when we go back, we will have the recorded versions. Hopefully that if we're not able to, it says it seems to be okay right now. So far I think it's okay now.
All right, so we can finish with other folks that we're going to be responding to the 3 questions that you asked me. So 3 of them.
Oh, what did I say? Oh, yeah, because I was talking about one, I think Alec addressed the idea of should people be calling themselves an ally? I mean, really, no. You could definitely say, I think you could definitely say, like, I believe in this, is who I am, this is what I'm working for. But calling yourself an ally, no. Maybe if you're talking to other white people and talking about the difference between allyship and being an accomplice or being more action-based, yes, but nobody should be putting it. It's like when people tell me they're an equity expert, or they're like, I'm an EDI expert. Whenever people start saying that to me, only people I know who say that they're an expert are white people. I've been working my expertise in whatever. I'm an expert in Black studies. Get out of here. You're not an expert. So that those badges, I feel like, I think they should not. That's my opinion, but. There's a couple of extra questions that were specifically around people of color. So one person was saying, gotta go back to these questions. Oh, wait, is it not going to let me move up? Guess
why
not.
I don't know why you're
okay. So, one of the people was saying, it says, is it problematic for white people to be saying they are sacrificing their privilege for equity, when in fact, white people's privilege is based on the resources stolen from Black, Indigenous people of color?
Yeah, I feel like they answered their question there.
Yes, you
did. and answer.
You got it.
There's been some questions also around colorism, right?
Yeah.
It's been really fascinating. Having a lot of conversations with several of my friends who are multiracial, biracial. And it's been very, very interesting, the assessment of cultural identity development. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting had to do with people, biracial and multiracial people, where the mother was not Black, right? But the mother was not Black, that there seemed to be some more of the identity stuff than if the mother was Black. I thought that was interesting in terms of who they are. And because they were saying there's this feeling of, if you have a white mother who's trying to raise biracial children, her feeling of insecurity about doing that effectively impacts the child's identity. I don't know if, I guess only one of you has, no, 2 of you guys have multiracial children. But I just was thinking about that, like in terms of identity and how multiracial people become allies or advocates within the realm of color and shade privilege. Kathy was talking a little bit about the more melanin you have, how people interact with you interculturally, and outside of the culture, because that becomes another thing, right? You're biracial, like your friend Richard, or he's not bicultural, but he passes, right? But if you're a biracial person, you have these multiple identities, but people feel an alliance with you, or they feel like you are betraying them should you become an ally in certain ways. So I don't know, I was thinking about maybe, I guess the only person who really can speak to that is Kathleen.
I would love to speak to that.
Yes.
I don't want to be all over the place with this, but it's so layered.
Mhm.
I want to talk to the whole issue of white women raising by quote unquote. I don't like the word biracial. I don't
Okay,
use
you
it.
know what? I don't
But
know.
yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? And I don't like it because it's just inaccurate. But anyway,
Right.
multi-ethnic, or I don't know, whatever. Anyway, my dad's black, my mom's white. So let's start there. Here's something that's going to maybe be a little bit controversial for the viewers. In my experience as a white looking, black, biracial, whatever you want to call it, white women have a very difficult struggle taking themselves out of the center. So, and what I mean by that is that anytime you're talking about something that's like Kwanzaa, if it's African based, or it's very difficult for white women to see this as fair. Oh, that's not fair. And so in this dialogue about raising children and them having a strong identity in who they are, I do think that sometimes children are not served well when they are taught, oh, you're the best of both worlds, and in the future everybody's gonna be golden like you. And I'm sorry to put that voice on it, but I'm sorry, that was wrong. But let me just tell you, that voice is there because I am that kid. And I am that kid that grew up in a Baha'i community with people who supposedly believe in the oneness of humanity and a future of justice and equity on earth. And people were telling me I'm some new hybrid better than both of the other. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So that doesn't help anybody. When Baha'u'llah said black people are like the pupil of the eye, surrounded by a sea of white, it is the pupil that contains the sight. When Baha'u'llah gave us that metaphor, and if you're not a Baha'i and you're watching this, in 1850s, when the rest of the world, including religious leadership, was talking about black people being animals and trying to prove scientifically that white people were the best thing on earth, and that it was the white man's burden to take care of everybody that wasn't white. All of that was happening at the same time, and Baha'u'llah said, black people are like the pupil of the eye. In other words, you will be blind. You will be blind if you try to construct a world system that doesn't recognize the value that black people will bring to that system, not the commodification of black bodies that happened. So from that perspective, I need you to know that I'm coming from a place where I really am so grateful to Baha'u'llah for this metaphor, because it's not hierarchical, where he didn't go, oh, we're gonna put black people up here so they can run everything. No, Baha'u'llah said center of the eye, the center. So anytime, if you're a white mom out there and you're raising black kids, or if you're trying to figure out how to be an ally, or whatever you want to call it, ask yourself, how difficult is it for you to take yourself out of the center and put black lives there? If somebody says black lives matter to you and your knee jerk is no, all lives matter, all lives matter. Ask yourself, why is that knee jerk happening? What is it about whatever I've been raised to believe about whiteness that doesn't allow me for a moment to go, let me step aside here. Let me take my whiteness out of the center for a minute and place black lives there so that we can get to the work of justice. Because when we get to the work of justice, it serves your white kids. It serves your biracial kids. It serves everyone. when justice is at the forefront.
That's a whole word. That was a whole word.
Well, that was
very good.
okay. Hey, that's why we here.
I know. So I want to know if anyone else wants to jump in around specifically, maybe even in helping people decenter that whiteness, because I do think that it's a different reaction to me saying, can you take yourself out of the center? I mean, I have friends of mine who I can say, you're centering yourself. And they're like, am I? Let me stop. And they'll, I can say that and they'll move. But in general, when people are centering themselves in everything related to equity for other folks, my, point is that the top rated and paid equity and diversity inclusion coordinators in the state of Oregon are white men. The fact that so when you have an look at Alex, you're so wrong. No, but you know what I'm saying? Like, how is it that you're making so much money doing stuff that you have the least lived experience to push people, but it feels like the safest thing to do, and to pay you extremely well when I'm supposed to give you my whole heart and life experience for free? So how do the white folks in the panel try to push the thinking of other white people in terms of moving themselves out of that center? And how successful have you been? Have you found the golden ticket to unlocking doing that?
There isn't a magical key, so I wish there was, but it's a process. I think especially those who are becoming newly engaged in the issues and are feeling very passionate about wanting to show up and not knowing exactly how to do it. Part of the question, I think, that from the viewer was about the impact of the harm coming in, and learning to trust and listen to Black people when they give us feedback. That's like key. And if you can't do that, you're not ready to be in the space yet. That if your impact is different than your intent, you have to accept that. And say, okay, I'm gonna do better next time. I'm sorry, and just move on. And it's also, the decentering is also not having to feel relieved of the burden of what you just did. You don't need to be made to feel better about the fact that you just screwed up big time. But if you're willing to accept that as the feedback that you need to grow to the next process, the next step, that is what allows you to grow. And it's not a destination. This is a lifelong process of figuring out how to decenter your whiteness. And what you understand now and what you understand 10 years from now will be extremely different. And then 10 years beyond that will be even different if you're looking at this as something that's your obligation to learn and understand, and you're continuing to work on that. And it requires a lot of, you can't do it without taking yourself out of the center, as you said. If you're coming into an organization or participating in something for the first time, and you immediately want to start organizing and telling people what to do, you're not doing the work. You're there to listen and to follow, and get yourself out of the way, so you're not one of the obstacles that people have to deal with.
Oh, wow. Yes.
The problem often with white folks is we don't know what we don't know. And sadly, it takes a mirroring process of showing us constantly where we're messing up. And again, another reason for us to have an extended family, not that should be the responsibility of people of color. Hopefully, white allies, advocates, can show other white people where they're messing up instead of it having to be a person of color. But sadly, if there isn't another white person in the room who can mirror that back and say, this is exactly what we're talking about, this is how we decentralize, it really is becoming a true servant in the truest sense of the word. How are we a servant to the community? How are we a servant to people who have received so much inequity and injustice? How do we become the servants that show our community, not anyone else, people who look like us, how to transform that so that we can change the world that we live in.
Before we go to Alec too, I just want to say this one thing is that it's interesting when we talk about centering whiteness. I was in a training one time. It was a crazy training. I won't even name who the trainer was. It was a nightmare. But there was one thing that I took away from that training. As much as the rest of it, I was writing letters about how she should be stopped. But the one thing that I did take away from it was there's this one moment where she put all the white people in the center of the room. And she said, look at each other and say, this is my community, right? Now, all the people of color who are normally centered in those situations in terms of pathologize. Oh, you've been this. You basically, you start adopting this. I'm underserved. I'm underprivileged. You take all that on and you're put in the center, but you are being centered in a pathological way. So this time put all the white people in the room and it was like, look at one another and say, welcome home. Now, this was the funniest crap ever because the community feeling was not there. No matter what we've been through, we've had community. Okay, no matter what we're going through, struggles, we have community. These strangers were looking around like, I don't know you, you're not my family. There's a Japanese woman next to me and she started crying and she grabbed me and she goes, look at how lonely they look. And she started crying, look at them. Oh, and she was like, just reach out to someone and say, I want to come home. Because again, being in white-centric spaces and being like, this is our community, we love our whiteness, has never been a good thing historically. But really, if you're going to make change, you have to embrace all the crazies and everybody else who's part of your community. That is your family. Those are your people. And so because we feel collective positivity and collective shame and no matter what happens in our community, we all feel it. They were sitting there looking like it was the most fascinating thing I've ever watched in my life because they were looking around like, I don't know what, it was like robots of Zombieland. I don't know what it was, but the idea that, part of building that family has to do with also saying, I love you through the fact that you don't know where you are, but your heart is in the right place and I'm going to help you move. And that's not my job. I don't have time for that. I don't have the energy for it. I don't have probably heart and health to do it. But I think that when you start looking at yourself as this is my community and I have to save my community from itself, then I think that you have a lot more leeway to make that happen. Alec, and then we're almost there. We're at the end. We have like 5 more minutes, but
I do want to say something before we get off.
Yeah, no. After Alex to Saida.
After.
So I had a couple pieces that I wanted to throw in with that, all that stuff. One is when we talk about following and letting people lead, right, or looking to leadership. An organization or a group or whatever, when there's leaders and there are people who are followers, leaders don't want people who are incapable. Leaders need people who are capable. And so if we're looking to follow, people think that like, oh, that means that I don't know what to do then because I'm just a follower. And I haven't had people say that to me, but that's the mentality of the way things come across and the way people talk and they act is that like, well, it's a passive thing. And to me, if you're looking to somebody to say, point me in the right direction, where are they going to point you if you have no skills, if you have no developed capacity for them to direct towards something, right? So I think that when we're talking about this kind of context with white folks, it's our job to continuously develop our understanding of these things. And then, segueing to the next piece that's related is that someone else was talking about this before, but when you're looking at your values around these things, right, that's a part of this stuff. So something that I want to encourage people to do is as you're learning about history, about social structures, about the institutions of society and how racism influences them, every single thing you learn, you should put a mirror up to that back on your personal life, your value system, and say to yourself, that thing, whatever it is that I'm studying and learning about, how is that reflected in my personal value system as a white person? Because it is. It factually will be there. And this goes back to what I think Joy was talking about it earlier with somebody saying, oh, I just want to do things proper. What you mean is a racist white methodology of existing. And if you're not deconstructing that in yourself, you're always going to be the well-meaning person who's harming people. You know, I would encourage anyone who's watching this who's white or white adjacent, white related, go read Letters to a Birmingham Jail. No matter how much you think you believe in Martin Luther King and his message, if all you know is one little snippet of the I Have a Dream speech, you don't know Martin Luther King Jr. Go read Letters to a Birmingham Jail. And when he talks about the white moderates, embody that. Believe that he's talking about you, because he is. He's talking about me. He's talking about well-meaning white people and the harm that they cause. And when you read something like that and you exclude it, well, that doesn't really mean me. You're missing the point, because it does, right? And the last piece of this whole thing that I wanted to throw out there is the way that I like to explain racism in a bigger picture, through a lot of, you know, my own research and, you know, some influenced by Dr. Joy. There's some really good stuff in Ibrahim X. Kendi's work about this, that racism is a system. And if you look at it historically and where it comes from Europeans who were making methodologies for exploitation to rationalize and justify it, right? So whiteness is an invention of Europeans to put themselves on the top of a hierarchy. When you have a hierarchy, you have a top and a bottom. The top is white. The bottom, it's like a triangle supported by anti-Blackness and anti-Indigenousness. And if you go everywhere in the world, you can see this triangle set up through colonialism. The way that it was put into the world is through colonialism, right? And if you look on that spectrum, you can see, like, if I'm not Black and I'm not white, well, I'm still not white. I might be in here and I might not be the target of the system, but at any point, the system can be targeted at me, you know, and because if you're not white. But the other thing that people want to ignore is that this exists everywhere Europeans colonized. So yes, you can have a Latinx background and still be white, right? Because Spaniards were white. Spaniards are not white. Now, if you're in the US, there's a level of things that's anti-Latin, Hispanic, whatever, that has layers on it as well. But it's like saying to somebody, you know, who's Polish, you know, somebody told Polish jokes. Well, they didn't know that it was offensive to you until you told them you were Polish, right? A lot of times you can be white, and until you speak Spanish, no one knows that you're from Uruguay, you know, and you still get a lot of that privilege. And so when you're looking at all these all have to combine together in your personal analysis of the white person as to what work am I doing and how am I doing it, and how is my values that I live with every day, that I was taught by parents and grandparents and passed on to me, and that I've engaged in, that I think have true value in the world, that are the way things are supposed to be, and that are moral and true, and re-examine the entire lens of that whole moral and true thing to understand that we're all influenced by believing what's moral and true and standard to the world through a racist lens.
Right.
And the only way you can deal with that is to re-evaluate it all of the time, every day, every moment, every new thing you learn.
Thank you.
How racist is this?
And we have Saida.
Dude, Alec, like, you said what I wanted to say.
Yes. We're good at stealing stuff.
Yeah. And no, but even in the beauty of that, right? Because usually in these conversations, I have to gear myself up. I have to I got to get the courage. I got to find the right words. I got to, you know, be the representative. So the fact that you said what I wanted to say now alleviates me from all of that. Now I don't have to put my energy into trying to convince or tell others what they need to be doing and thinking. And so you, as a white male, knowing how I'm feeling and what I'm about to say and what needs to be said, now you've taken that pressure off of me. And so that's what needs to happen. The white folks need to know the story so well.
That's right.
That you're doing the work and letting us live for our purpose. Because right now it's just been a fight. It's been, I'm a woman, I'm Latinx, you know, I come from this family, and I'm constantly defending myself, and I'm constantly trying to figure out what is my history. You know, like all of us here on this call, we had to go out of our way to understand what the truth of this country was. And we're constantly digging up stuff and like, oh, what did you have? Oh, this is what I heard now. And so we're always searching and looking for things. And so I think that's why people, you know, so white folks, when you hear people say, I'm tired, I don't want to talk about this anymore, it's because we've gone on this journey to figure out our own history. So now it's time for you to figure out what the real history is and understand our story so well that you can articulate it and stand up for it. That's what needs to happen. That's what needs to happen. So thank you, Alec. Thank you so much. I can be in a meeting with you all at any time.
Can I offer a brief public service announcement?
Yes.
Saida, that was such an amazing example of the passion that is always going to be a part of this conversation, right? And one of the things that happens for white people who are not used to the passion is they start trying to police your tone. Well, if you would just say it softly, or if you would just say it without using certain words, or you know, if you can do it in a way that makes me comfortable, I'd be right there with you.
Right.
And that kind of tone policing, we need to be really clear that there is no proper way. What is it, Joy, that you said? There's no the proper way to have these conversations. The way to have these conversations is to keep it real, to be honest, to be truthful, to be willing to hear things that are hurtful, and to not ask people to package it in a way that you can take it.
Wow. What's so wonderful about this is everybody's saying all the stuff that I'm so glad I forgot and wanted to say. You know, I'm so glad. And again, you know, I'm looking at all of us are moving through the world real differently. And I think like right now is a perfect opportunity. We are being presented with an opportunity to get this right. We really are. The whole world. We can't claim to not know. We just really can't. It's in your face. The issue is what side of history you want to be on. What side of history you're going to end up on. That's what's going to end up in the end. Where were you in history? And where were you in your lane? And I'm confident with folks in their lanes doing what they have to do. We don't all have to do the same thing. We don't all have to agree on anything. We have to agree on a couple of fundamentals: that everyone was born with the right to be treated with respect and dignity. They don't have to earn that. They were born deserving it. And if we could all just agree on that, that as human beings, that is something that we all deserve. And that we have to insist upon it for everyone around us, everyone. Yeah. You know, I don't know, you know, as an African-American woman, I don't care if I see somebody mistreated. I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. If this is a wrong, I'm gonna lean into that. I mean, my kids would go, please don't, Mom. Sometimes go,
my kid, don't get involved. Don't get involved.
That's my family. Come on, Saida, please. Just not today. Not today.
You just see that though? We attract people who aren't no punks. That's my thing. I don't have time for punks. That's like I don't roll with people who, if somebody starts something, I think you're gonna leave me in the fight by myself. I should never get jumped. And that's how I feel about racism. If I'm in a space where there's some crazy crap happening and I tell the truth, I shouldn't have to worry about getting jumped because I got my people with me. And if I can't count on you to jump in, literally, then we ain't cool. Don't call me for coffee. Don't call me for no coffee. All right, well, we've come to the end. We always go over, but this is what I always tell people, like, my dad once said to me, you are so prejudiced against the average Joe white person. And I was like, I'm not. But really, I just don't have a lot of time. Because what's the thing? There are people who have ultimately always like want my children to interact with their children. And so I tell people, because you see the benefit of having your child having the benefit of having the experience of knowing my child. But I know you think you're an individual, but I know enough white people. I don't need no new white friends. So unless you are really coming 100% and it's going to be something that's going to add to my life, I'm not there to help you out. I just don't have that kind of energy or that time. So if you really want to be about something, if you really want to have Black friends, then be about the work. Like Alex said, just do what you're supposed to do. Do what you know you're supposed to do. And that's part of becoming.
Don't put a safety pin on.
Don't put it, yeah, nah. Don't do that. But definitely become more human, because the more that you can lean into your own discomfort, the more human you actually become. You're not fully human. That's what reminds me of that Avatar piece where it's just like you have to die to become human. You got to let this whiteness die, your attachment to it die, to become more fully human and to be able to connect with other people in the world and to be able to feel your way to Black people. They don't feel nothing for us. So that's the thing, is when you don't feel the same kind of compassion for me that you would if these were white bodies in the streets, or if your Cocker Spaniel's being choked out, then you need to think about why you can't feel that kind of compassion and humanity. You're not fully human. You're not engaging your full humanity. So get your mind right.
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah. And can I just add that back to what Alec was saying, in the Latino community, take this dialogue and apply it because it's applicable. Just darker skin, lighter skin, but the ships went to America, South America, North America, so everything that was said here, take it back to your families, apply it, think about it. If you're getting married to a white guy, don't say it's purifying your blood and all that stuff. So just take everything that was said. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. Take everything that was said and apply it. Apply it, please. Thank you. Done.
All right.
Well, it's been wonderful.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, all of you. And be safe and be happy and be healthy.
Love you, Auntie. Love you,
Thank
Kate.
you.
Love you,
Love
Sandra.
you.
Alex, and we'll see you all later.
Thank you, Joy.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.